fresh, lifelike skin tones are notoriously difficult. So let's dive into understanding them better so that you can get the fresh skin tones that you see in the paintings that you love by the masters, both living and dead. There's a three-pronged approach that I suggest if fresh skin tones are something that are very challenging for you. There's brush control, palette control, and then finally the actual mixing of the paint. We so often think that it's all about what's happening on the palette, and it is, but it's also about the environment. If your brushes are super dirty, then you're not going to have as fresh of color. If your palette isn't organized, then you're going to have a much harder time keeping that color fresh and lifelike and knowing where you're going. And then thirdly, if your mixtures are too overburdened with too many pigments and you're not quite sure how to even think and approach the skin tones, it will lead again to that lifeless, chalky skin tone that you might be fighting on the canvas. So let's go to the easel and chat about it. I've drawn two cartoonish faces to work on to show a light-skinned skin tone mixture sort of thought process, and then going to a more richly skin toned, a richly complected person, and show how the same philosophy applies regardless of what color and value family you're working in. Let's begin with the light skinned over here, and you're going to notice that I'm going to also be paying attention to the other two prongs, not just the mixture itself, but also I'm going to be organizing my palette by value, and I'm going to be taking care to keep my brush very clean. And in fact, for the sake of the demonstration, I will use a light value brush and a dark value brush, and I'll explain the reason behind that. All right, every person, regardless of where they are from, is going to have a warm undertone to their skin because we're warm-blooded mammals, and we are all, again, regardless of where we're from, going to have that warm undertone. All right, perhaps you are having everyone looking quite a bit sunburned. It might be because you are sticking with just these very, very warm colors. So I've mixed a sort of generic fleshy peach here with cadmium red and cadmium yellow medium. This is a great base for a skin tone, but it can be a little cloying. It's very intense, and it's not as sophisticated as the colors that I see on very lovely fair-skinned people. So this is a great beginner, but then in order to sort of bring that sophistication in, I want to incorporate a few other colors into the mixture. And what I often see with very fair-skinned individuals is that by coming in and putting a little bit of a complement or a cooler color, so in this case I'm using a cooler color than the colors that are in the mixture already, this King's Blue, I can come in and neutralize that color just a bit and see how that just reducing, I'm gonna add a little bit more light value here, just by reducing some of that warmth, that overall cloying warmth that was there, we have a much more sophisticated color happening on the painting now, okay? So I've got warm and warm, and I'm gonna add a cool. Alternatively, what I could do is use a cooler red, like an alizarin, not quite so hot and warm. I'll still go into my cadmium yellow medium and mix a cooler pink and try laying that down as well. See how that also is a bit more sophisticated than, say, that really intense bright color I was using before. If I want to tone down the chroma, the intensity of the color, I will come in and I can also use the complement. So I'm going to dip down into my Viridian down here just a bit, and it might be too much, so I'm going to bring it back up a little bit more with some of this cadmium yellow medium and place that down. See how that is actually now a beautiful lovely skin tone. It might be looking dark because we're on a white background, but it's not going to look dark soon. Now we've got this lovely skin tone mixture that I'm going to begin to place sort of around the features. All right, something to keep in mind as well. You're going to have a lot more warmth running through this area of the face. This is the area when you get cold, the blood is so close to the surface, your nose turns very red, your cheeks turn very red, and your ears turn very red. All right, so that's generally going to be a warmer area of the face, a little bit more chroma, a little more pink happening in that area. And when we go up to the forehead, it gets a little bit more orange often. I'm going to mix right into my cadmium orange and just see what happens to this mixture. And you see how I am staying all with the same brush, and I'm keeping all of these mixtures very close together just like they are on my painting. That is not by accident. I'm not dipping up here and then doing it over here and then over here. It becomes more important the more values that you add, of course. And we'll see that when we start adding some deep shadow mixtures in here, which will happen very, very shortly. It gets a little bit more peachy up here as a general rule. All right, paint what you see. That's sort of the motto that we hear everywhere, but also against some other popular opinion, I encourage you to paint also what you know, and especially if skin tones are really challenging for you, it can be helpful to know a few things about what is generally happening on the face. Generally then, as we come down the chin, and you see how we've even got forehead mixture here, cheek mixture here, and now I'm coming down the face, so I'm coming down the palette, and I'm going to start incorporating some slight more greens to the skin down here. Why is that the case? There's a lot more green that happens down here, and part of it is because usually we're lit from above. So usually our models are lit from up here. So there's the highest concentration of light at the top of the face with a big, strong, beautiful highlight happening, you know, somewhere on the forehead potentially. Coming down the form, it would be on the fullest point of that form. So there's that big highlight. But then as the light continues to travel down the face, it gets more and more diffused. So it's going to become a little less vibrant, a little less chromatic, and there's just this phenomenon that happens that it also becomes more green. If you are feeling like you just are mixing the same color everywhere in your paintings and you're really just turning the form with value, it might be because you're just only using different varieties of pinks. There's a lot more green happening down here in the face than you may realize. All right, you're probably looking at this right now and thinking, this feels insane. All right, well, it's time to go into the dark values, and you're gonna wanna do it pretty quickly. So I'm pretending that this model is lit with a pretty strong light. And you've maybe heard, okay, if you're painting a light and shadow portrait, there will be, if there's a warm light on it, there'll be warm in the light, warm colors in the light, and cools in the darks. And vice versa. If you're painting with a cool light on the model, it'll be cool in the lights and warm in the darks. That is a load of hogwash. There will be warms and cools in the area in the light, and there will be warms and cools in the area of the shadow. There is nowhere that there is going to be only warm and only cool. You can test it out for a couple years and then come back and find out that that was true. I tested that out for a couple years and had orange skin tone and purple shadows and was very dissatisfied with the results. So I suggest going in very quickly, probably sooner even than I did, for the sake of this demo, to find a rich shadowy color. Okay, so if we're painting this model and she's in a rich light and shadow situation, that's going to maybe be a bit dark here, so let's bring it in. I'm going to find my most generic color. And it's usually can be a very warm color happening over in here that I'm going to tone down again with the complement. So I've got some mixture, some transparent colors, transparent oxide yellow, transparent oxide red, and then I'm toning it down with some of the complement. This is Shiva Yellow Citron by Richardson and Viridian, and I'm just finding a slightly more sophisticated color than that strong red. And I'm going to add a little bit of white to it to then soften some of those strong colors as well, okay? And this is, again, we're just doing a very posterized image here. I'm gonna put some of my solvent-free gel in there, and I'm just going to show you the strong light and shadow situation and the strong warmth coming in all around the form, okay? I'm going to incorporate a little bit more green in here, a little bit of this yellow. I'm mostly thinking in greens and yellows at this point because, greens and reds, right? Because we are warm-blooded creatures. Blue doesn't have a whole lot of a place right now in the portrait. So let's just get this posterized image. Underneath the nose, there's going to be a shadow. Underneath that top lip, there's going to be a beautiful shadow if she's lit from above. And underneath that bottom of the lip. So that's the 5 darks of the face. Under the eyebrow, under the eyes, under the nose, under the lips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I did this wrong. Under the eyebrow area and the eye socket, under the nose, under the top lip, under the bottom lip, under the chin is the 5 darks of the face, okay? And then we have this slight dark happening over here, going down into the neck. Okay, I've just got a generic ballpark color for this shadow, but do you see how it's throwing into reality all of these other areas? I've got these green cools, I've got these fresh, brilliant skin tones happening, and you see how much lighter this value is than it initially appeared. Skin tones will often trick you if you're not careful. So get that shadow in pretty quickly, all right? Because this was appearing very dark before. That could be some of your problem if skin tones are chalky. Your shadows are probably not dark enough. So this would appear dark and chalky instead of fresh, okay? This is my dark value brush. I'm putting it back down because I'm going back into the lighter values here. All right, for this, it's sad but true that we're not going to be able to come in and do a full portrait like I do twice a month inside the Broadcasting Brushers for 3 hours during this short demo, because this is just for the sake of the skin tone discussion. But if you want to see how I approach this from life with a real model in 4K resolution, come and paint with me inside the Broadcasting Brushers, inside my Patreon, Confident Brushstrokes Patreon, and I am doing this live twice a month, okay? So do you see how now I'm just branching off into some other little areas, but keeping my brushes separate, so the values are clear, and then I'm mixing my paint so that it is very clear together. It's very, not clear together, that's a confusing way to put that. It's not a guess. I'm just moving down, and I'm not pre-mixing any colors, all right? I don't understand how anyone could pre-mix a color, because I don't know what the color is going to be until I've tested it on the canvas. Like this sort of strange green doesn't feel like anything until then when I put it up on the canvas. Oh, it reads beautifully as a greener area under the face, and it can feel under the on the chin. It can feel very odd to mix a color like that. Let's just put a little pink in for this lip before we go into some of the better, larger transition tones. Okay, this is feeling a little too pinky chalky. What do I know? I can add the complement to reduce the chroma. I can add a cooler color to bring down that chroma of the warmth. Just like if it was a too cool color, I would add a warmer color to it. So for the sake of just experimentation, let's try adding a little ultramarine blue on this side. Oh, and see how that gave us just a beautiful, very sophisticated shift in the form. And I've done it now 3 different ways, with a cooler light color, a complementary color, a green, and now with a ultramarine type color. And see how that brings us this cooler tone. So we're going warm, cool. As the form turns around, it will go from a big warm to a slightly cooler area, back to warm, back to cool. Notice this in nature. It is happening everywhere. This way the light waves bounce around the form. Okay, I'm going to go into the transition tone, and then we're going to mix a darker value complexion. I've got cadmium red here. I've got cadmium yellow medium. And what am I doing? Well, when you're mixing with skin tones, we've got this idea, okay, a little oranger up here, a little pinker down here, which we're going to go further into now, and a little greener down here. It's already feeling really fresh. We've got this nice dark value underneath in the shadow, but what happens all along this edge right here, right before it goes into the shadow? Well, you will have your area of highest, whoops, I must have gotten a little blue into my brush. I'm going to mix it back fresh. I'm not going to scrape it off. I'm going to lay more paint down, which is another big factor if you are having a hard time with chalky color and not painterly brush strokes. If you can, never scrape off, and you can, so I'll remove the if you can phrase because I know you can. Never scrape off, but always paint it better. All right, so there we go. There we go. All right, you're gonna have your area of the most chroma happening right before that shadow comes around the form. Why is that? So I'm gonna just lay down this soft pinky cheek color. It makes sense. I'm gonna mix into just lightly what was there before. Why does that happen? Well, if this is the area of the skin that's in the light, it's sort of being blown out by the light. The highlight is the area where there is actually there's a lot of color happening in the highlight, but it's such a high value, you're limited to some degree. So it's sort of blown out up there in the highlight. We can find so many different colors happening in these highlights, which would make it so interesting and fun to come in, keeping it all the same value, but it's sort of just blown out up there. Well, and then in the shadows, it's the opposite. There's such absence of light that then it is a little bit, it's very dark, obviously. Well, right there, right before the form turns, having just fun with that highlight, is the area where you will actually have the most pure chroma because it's not being blown out by the light. And you will be able to get some really exciting color mixtures there. But then it will also turn a little bit cooler right before it goes into that shadow. And if you don't see these colors, if you sit down with a live model or after watching this video and you are thinking, what is Stephanie talking about? I don't see this stuff. Truly look for it. Paint to some degree what you know and make it happen on your painting. Okay, well, I'm going to turn this mixture a little bit greener towards the base, and I promise you, you are going to start seeing these things. The more that you look for them and study them in the masters. See, I'm putting a slightly cooler color there. I'm going to go back with this warmer color, and you're going to see how the form starts to really turn. And again, this would be like the block-in stage of the painting. It gets a little bit darker in value, but it's still in the light right there. And maybe we'll come in just for the sake of the drawing a little bit with a cooler color because the form is turning slightly away from the light to show just a little bit more suggestion of what could be happening in this area of the face, a little bit more sophisticated as it comes around. This shadow, whoops, I dipped into that dark color with my light value brush. I'm going to control that and not let that happen. See, this shadow might come around a little bit more. As it comes around the form, we'll have this model just be sort of casting her eyes downward. And then we have this core shadow coming right around the form. Do you see how that form is really beginning to turn? I'm using ballpark colors that then I am making more sophisticated as we come around. We might find a highlight that's a little bit cooler in color, so I'll go to a cooler red. And I'm keeping these mixtures as few colors as possible and mixtures that I can name, all right? This is a cool pink coming in there. Ooh, that's a nice, maybe the value could come up just a little bit more to turn that form. Oh, really sophisticated, really soft transitional turn as it comes around. Now where the skin meets the eyebrow ridge, you know, there's going to be a slight shift there. So if it's very warm on this large plane, I'm going to show the form turning. As opposed to just using value, I'm going to turn the temperature to a little bit cooler and see what happens. Too dark in value, I need to keep it very close. It's nice that I have these other colors right next of where I'm even mixing in. I can use the thick paint that I've got underneath there and just ever so slightly turn that form a little bit greener right there as it turns around, and then restate that forehead because now my drawing got a little bit off. Do you see what I'm doing? It's not rocket science. I am controlling the brush by keeping the fresh color fresh, by not jumping around values everywhere. I'm thinking in warms and cools, and I'm thinking in big color groups that I can name, okay? Is it more red? Is it more green? Is it more blue? I'm not going for the most difficult color at first. Now I can maybe come in and find, oh, there's a little bit of chroma here. Now that I have these other different colors interacting in the scene, I'm gonna come in, probably should have done it with my dark value brush. Oh, and there's actually a little bit more warmth in the corner of this mouth. Right before this turns into the shadow underneath the lip, I'll have the highest area of chroma. I'll use a nice soft edge there, and then I actually see a little bit more green in that shadow. Go into my shadow brush, keep myself accountable here, and I see it a little bit more green. It's dark color, so I might want to stick with some more transparent pigments, which we can talk about. I have a whole series inside my Patreon about transparency and opacity and how you can use that to your favor inside my Academy tier, where I talk in depth about all of the principles of painting that I'm talking about here: value, color, edges, drawing, composition, paint manipulation. All right. Look at that, look at that. We just did this completely from our minds, and look at how fresh and how real, and there's so much more to learn, but you could do a lot if this was your start. If these were the fresh skin tones that you had, you could come in and find that there's a very cool sort of turn to the skin happening right here. So I'm going to just take my skin tone mixture and turn it a little bit cooler with my cooler colors. Again, I'm not thinking, oh, what's the secret mixture to skin tones? That doesn't exist. If you're learning someone's secret mixture to painting literally anything, all you're doing is mimicking them, and you are too good of an artist to just mimic someone else. So look, then I find that there's actually some cooler passages happening inside these shadows, and now we're getting even more sophistication, warms and cools. See, I see that cool passage running down the skin there, and then look at how it's even becoming more alive. I was originally going to go and do that second demo with a more richly complected model, but we're already kind of at our time because I was having so much fun chatting about these things with you with this lighter skin model. So comment below if you're interested in a part 2, and let's recap where we've been. Having fresh color in skin tones is not rocket science, and if you can control your brush, your palette and your mixture, you will be so much further ahead than maybe where you are right now with unsatisfactory color and chalky skin tones, or maybe just chalky color everywhere in all of your paintings, because this is not just a specific application for skin tones, but this thought process will carry over to all other subject matters, okay? So first, we control the brush. If you are getting dirty color repeatedly in your paintings and you feel like you're adding so much color, look at your environment. It's maybe your brush. Maybe you're using the same brush for everything and you don't know how to wipe it out properly. You're not controlling the mixtures very well. Get 2 brushes. Do the entire painting with 2 brushes, one for the light values, one for the dark values. Wipe the brush out excessively between mixtures, even though they're in the same value group, so that you're not mixing between strokes, okay? Control the brush. You can do an entire painting with 1 brush and do it masterfully without having this contamination, but you have to learn how to control the brush, how to keep those dark mixtures deep into the bristles of the brush and those light mixtures sitting on top of the brush, and wiping. I don't use any Gamsol on my brushes during the process, and I often do an entire painting with a wide variety of values with just the 1 brush. But if you struggle, separate them, all right? Separate the brushes and be vigilant about it. Okay, the palette. The second prong is palette control. Don't make this harder for yourself than you need to, all right? If your paintings, on your painting, if the colors are going to live next to each other, like that peach color we mixed and that green color of the chin, have them live together on the palette. Compare them on the palette first before you go to the painting. Don't be hunting and pecking everywhere trying to find, oh, where was my last color mixture on the palette, and getting this huge headache running. Control the palette, keep those value groups close together, mix colors that are going to be close together on the painting, close together on the palette, and when it starts to get messy, scrape it all the way off and start over. Don't make this harder for yourself than you need to. Okay, the third element is the actual act of mixing the color. If anyone out there is telling you, here's the secret to a fresh skin tone mixture, you are learning a method, you are learning their technique, and unfortunately, that will not carry over to all other subject matters, like the way I am sharing this information of how to think about color mixing. It applies to skin tones, but it applies to everything else, okay? Don't do yourself the disservice of just being someone's very good second best. I want you to be the best you that you can be. You have a unique voice, and you do not deserve to just learn other people's techniques and then be a copyist, all right? Learn the principles so that then you have limitless, you have a huge runway, no end of the things that you can paint, and just become more masterful in your style, okay? So the way to think about this topic of skin tones is not what is the perfect mixture for the skin tone, because guess what? If you start to paint in a different lighting condition, if you put a really cool light on the model, if you paint at a sunset where there's this warm red, everything is going to change. So the philosophy is what matters here. Start with the most obvious color, like I did, that peachy color, and it was way too garish, and then go towards the more sophisticated colors, asking yourself questions that have real answers, instead of, oh, why does this look chalky? You look at it, or why does this look too garish? I could have asked that. Instead, I said, this is too high in chroma. What do I do about it? It's looking garish because it's too bright. All right, I need to cool it down because it's too warm. So now, do I want to cool it down with the complement, because I know the complement of a color will cool it? Do I want to just mix a cooler color into it? And I tried it, and I did it 3 different ways throughout the course of the demo, and each one worked, and each one had a slight subtle difference. So I'm not mixing big pre-mixed piles that are guesses and then using them everywhere on the painting so that it feels very plasticky. I'm having this living, breathing experience of mixing the paint a little bit different for different areas, so that there's nowhere in the painting that is entirely the same as anywhere else, which is, guess what? Exactly what's happening in real life as well. So think, is it more red? Is it more yellow? Is it more blue? Is it more warm? Is it more cool? And then pay attention to those values, which again harkens back to our first two prongs, the brush control and the palette control. But if your shadows are not deep enough, if they are not warm enough in the deepest shadows on the human form, it will always be warm, because what's underneath the surface? Blood, heat. If you do not have warmth and deep enough values in those shadows, your skin tones will be chalky. If your shadows are blue, it doesn't matter what's going to happen in these light values, they will appear chalky. So it is important what's happening in the lights and the shadows. There's warms and cools in the lights, there's warms and cools in the shadows. All you need to think about is, am I controlling my brush? Am I controlling my palette? Is it more red, more yellow, more blue? And you'll be off to the races. You should come paint with me inside the Patreon. I'm talking about this and so much more all of the time during our live streams. In the Academy, I'm going on a deep dive into this topic of color temperature in particular, and value, drawing, paint application. So if you want more, go to the Confident Brushstrokes Patreon and you can find everything there. Thank you for joining me. I am Stephanie and I hope to see you next time.